Madam Speaker, I think I may say Comrade President, and Comrade Vice President, and ladies and gentlemen. Madam Speaker, I've told you already how I feel when you asked me to come and talk here. And then I got the message that you are coming. Of course, I'm happy you are here. But what do I say in your presence in this house? This is not my first time here. I've been here before, and I've thanked you. But I must thank you again. For me to come here in this chamber and address you is a dream which you have helped to make true. How could any one of us think that it would be possible for me or people of my type to come in this country and speak from a forum like this? So, Mr. President, and all your colleagues, I say thank you very much for making this possible. Now for sharing.
Julius Kambarage Nyerere, who was born on April 13, 1922 and died in October 14, 1999, was the President of the United Republic of Tanzania until his retirement in 1985. Born in Tanganyika to local Zanaki chief called Nyerere Burito, Julius Nyerere was known by the Swahili name Mwalimu, or teacher, because of his profession before becoming active in politics. Nyerere was the first African head of state to retire voluntarily. Talking of the foreign policy, Nyerere was one of the African leaders during the Pan-African movement that swept the continent in the 1960s. He was a larger-than-life person, a seemingly incorruptible individual, and a committed Pan-Africanist. Nyerere was also one of the founders of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. Nyerere provided a home to a number of African liberation movements, including the African Congress PAC of South Africa, Frelimo when it sought to overthrow Portuguese rule in Mozambique, and ZNLA led by Robert Mugabe in its struggle to unseat the white regime in southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe.
For sharing with you my thoughts. My thoughts, unfortunately, don't change. So, a lot of what I'm going to say, some of you have heard before, but some of you have not heard before. I'm going to say two things about Africa. One, that Africa south of the Sahara is an isolated region of the world. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say, that Africa south of the Sahara is not what it is believed to be, because Africa is now changing. So let me see if I can share those thoughts with you in a very short period. Africa south of the Sahara is an isolated region of the world. During the last 10 years, since my retirement as head of state of my country, I was asked and I agreed to establish something called the South Commission. And that has meant a lot of traveling. I've been many times to Latin America, many times to Asia, many times to many parts of Africa before coming here, and many times to a large number of countries in Europe. The world is changing. It's not only Africa which is changing. The world is changing. There are three big blocks. After the end of the Cold War, there are three big blocks of power developing in the world. One, the obvious one, is the United States. It has always been there. The United States is building around it a group of other countries. That's a power area. It is the obvious one. It is the one which is very clear. The other one is Europe. It's an obvious power block. The other one is Japan and the areas of Asia around it. The United States has neighbors. One of them is Mexico, from the third world. A president of Mexico is reported to have said once, "Poor Mexico," this is the president of the country, "Poor Mexico, so far from God and so near to the United States."
The late founding father of the nation, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, at all times he will be remembered as the founding father of the nation here in Tanzania. In this special edition of marking the 25th anniversary of the death of late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, here is a compilation of various comments, replies, and experiences from diplomats from various countries, representing their particular countries here in Tanzania, on the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere's legacy. First is on how they could describe the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere as a founding father of the nation of Tanzania and as a Pan-Africanist leader.
If we look into it, we cannot say that 25 years have passed, because the teachings of the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere is still with us. He was a great visionary leader who had an insight of what to expect for the coming years and how to deal with it, perhaps. So I think he lives on with us with his ideology and his directives and his visions, and he is a great African leader who believed in Africa. He believed in how to cooperate together, how to grow together as a continent, as countries within the continent, and as brothers and sisters within this continent.
Mwalimu Nyerere's role and contribution to our country, Mozambique, firstly, was for us to attain our independence, because he's the one who facilitated to bring our founding father, the late Eduardo Mondlane, to Tanzania in Dar es Salaam. And that's when Eduardo Mondlane established our Liberation Party, Frelimo. This is something that we can never forget. It is one of the main historical achievements for the people of Mozambique and also Tanzania. Secondly, Mwalimu's contribution was not only to Mozambique, but to other countries from the Southern Africa, such as Namibia, Angola, and South Africa, and at that time, they started an organization. Mwalimu Nyerere had closer relations at that time with the former president of Mozambique, Samora Machel, and did act as parents, him and his wife, Mama Maria Nyerere, to Samora and Graca's wedding. Mwalimu was the first president to provide a state visit to Mozambique just after the country attained its independence in 1975. And one of the main important things was the establishment of bilateral diplomatic ties between the two countries by incepting a diplomatic mission of Tanzania in Maputo and vice versa. On top of that, during the visit, Mwalimu did give a speech to the nation, of which some parts of his words from his speech are put in books used in school for students to learn.
I think he was a wonderful leader, a great visionary, and one who understood the concept of Pan-Africanism. One who also understood that when a brother suffers, the other driver cannot turn away. That's why also he brought our people, in Mazimbu, we have learned which was given to the African National Congress. And we managed also to build a school there, the Solomon Mahlangu College, which is now the Universities of Somasco, a university. And this also speaks to the relations that we have with Tanzania.
The ambassador of the Arab Republic of Egypt to Tanzania, His Excellency Sharif Ismail, shares leadership skills and values that the late Mwalimu Nyerere had as a leader, of which he even cites similarities of the former president Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt and Mwalimu Julius Nyerere had as leaders of Africa.
He has more than one skill, to be honest. And if I say only one, that would do injustice to his great vision. But the one that to me strikes really like a resemblance is the inclusion. He had this vision of inclusion of everyone to be on board, everyone to reap the benefits, everyone to be moving forward and reaping development. And not only within the borders of Tanzania, but even beyond. This is why he was a Pan-Africanist. He did not look only for the benefit of Tanzania and Tanzanians. He looked for the benefit of the whole area, the whole region, not only within East and South Africa, but even the whole continent. You know, he had great relations with our late President Gamal Abdel Nasser as well. And at that period, you know, the Pan-Africanism, it was strong. There was strong bonds and strong interaction. We all had the great feelings that it is the time for Africa. This is the time that Africa can work together and grow and develop. So this inclusion, this is for me the most interesting part. Well, first of all, they shared some very basic and very clear factors. They were both very charismatic. They were both very well respected within their areas and regions, and they had visions. They had visions not only in the current time, but they had visions for the future. They had visions for the future of Africa. You know, they came together to make the Organization of African Unity because they were dreaming of a better tomorrow for all of Africa. They shared this. They knew that the time for Africa is coming, and we have to work together so everyone can reap the benefit of working together and forgetting the time of colonialism and the huge price that this continent has paid. It is hand in hand that we can grow together, and hand in hand that we have a brighter future together. That was in the 1960s, and it still holds true today.
Through Mwalimu Julius Nyerere's charismatic leadership that portrayed throughout the time he was in power and beyond, what legacy do you think the late Mwalimu has left to African leaders today, and not only African leaders, but the world at large?
Nakumbuka ya kuwa neno moja au sentence moja aliyosema ilikuwa jamani, ni watu wa Msumbiji, ndugu zangu wa Msumbiji.
Mwalimu was among us the Pan-Africanist leaders who dreamt and needed Africa to be free and independent, and also wanted Africa to be one. That is why in 1963 there was the establishment of OAU and now AU. Some of the other African leaders were such as Ben Bella, Ahmed Sekou Toure, who had a dream of one day Africa will be one. And today, as we commemorate 25 years of Mwalimu's death, we need to keep these dreams alive, as our fellows in Europe have united, and we should take the same path and cooperate as unity shows cooperation.
So he is the one whose vision was, he crisscrossed, during his time, he crisscrossed Africa during very difficult times, trying to ensure that every country got their freedom, you know. And ours, unfortunately, we got it when he was no longer with us. But we appreciate the big contribution that he made to not just to the nation of Tanzania, but to us in South Africa. You know, there are songs, freedom songs.
In South Africa?
Yes, in South Africa. for Julius Nyerere. In other places, you'll find Julius Nyerere Street and so on. That is an indication how people in South Africa respect and love him. 25 years. Yes. And this is, we're talking about the younger generation as well. He's spoken about in lectures, his name is referred to even during interviews like this one. People will refer, it's written in books. That is how big his name is because of the contribution and the legacy that he left all of us.
I'm here for close to 2 years. Yes. I see the respect that Muallim Julius Nyerere has on the society and on the subsequent governments that came in office. Because of his vision, he put Tanzania on the right track, that it was easy for all the following leaders to follow suit and to deliver on the aspirations and dreams that he had put in place. Because they were correct dreams, they were right. For Tanzania and for Africa, I cannot speak separately between the both. I had the chance, at least when I have the chance, I get to read some of the writings and some of the quotations that are left for us by Muallim Julius Nyerere. And I have the example here because I like to go back to his ideology because I know it still holds true until today. So I believe he had the manuscript. He had the vision of what was back then in his time and still holds true today. It is very interesting for me, for example, to draw the parallels for when he speaks about equality, for when he speaks about human rights, for when he speaks about the benefits for all. It is true in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and up to today. So I think this is the legacy that he left for us. This is what I see living in Tanzania. This is what I see that the Tanzanians hold in respect for this great leader. And I look forward to learning more as I stay longer in this great and hospitable country, inshallah.
Indeed, the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, through his leadership as the former president and founding father of the nation, Tanzania did impact the Africa and the world as a whole. As we commemorate this October his 25th anniversary since his departure, here is a message.
I wish Tanzania all the best. I wish them ever more development. Egypt is always ready to partner with Tanzania, as our great leaders have put us on the track, and as our current leaders, Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan and our President Abdel Fattah Sisi, are always working hand in hand with the vision that our people and our continent deserve more cooperation and more development, and we can do it together hand in hand. We have a great project that is already bearing fruit, and it holds the name of the great leader, the Julius Nyerere hydropower plant. This is a starting point. This is not the end. This is the beginning of partnerships that can grow bigger and bigger for the benefit of both countries and continent, inshallah.
Julius Nyerere's legacy will always live on.
Africa is of interest when we are killing one another. We arouse a lot of interest. Now, the big news now in Europe and North America is not here. It's in Congo Brazza. Congo Brazza is now big news. The television screens are full of what is happening in Congo Brazza. That's news, and it won't last for long. It might last for until the end of this week, and then it's out. And then Africa might appear if we want to appear in European on European television. We can cause more trouble somewhere. Mr. President, I think I've made that point. Africa south of the Sahara is isolated. Africa south of the Sahara, in the world of today, is on its own. Totally on its own. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say, Africa is changing. The Africa, I've been to Europe, and I say Europe, Asia, North America, Latin America. And Africa is a stereotype. Because the Africa which now arouses some interest is that Brazzaville Africa, that Rwanda Africa, that Somalia Africa, that Liberia Africa. That is the Africa which arouses interest. And I don't blame these people. That's the Africa one that they know. And so I go out. I come from Tanzania. We don't have these blessed troubles as they have in other places. But I go out, and sometimes I get annoyed, but sometimes I don't get annoyed. Here I am, former president of my country, no problem in Tanzania. We've never had these problems that they have. But I'm an African, and they see me, and they ask me the problems of Rwanda. I said, but I don't come from Rwanda. But you come from Africa.
What's the difference?
But I don't meet everybody. I don't meet an Englishman somewhere. If Blair was to come to Dar es Salaam, I don't ask him what is happening in Bosnia. It never occurs to me. I should ask Blair, what is happening to you Europeans because of what is happening in If President Kohl was to come somewhere, I don't ask him what is happening in Chechnya. Well, Kohl could say, why are you asking me anything about Chechnya? I don't know what is happening in Chechnya. But this is not true about Africa. About Africa, Mr. President, you go, here you are, trying to build something which is a tremendous experience. But perhaps you are different, because sometimes they think South Africa is different. So perhaps they would say, but this is President Mandela, this is different, it's not... But for the likes of me, no, I'm an African. And I say sometimes I get irritated, but then I say, why? Why do I get irritated? Because, of course I'm a Tanzanian, but what is this Tanzania? What is this Tanzania? Why should these Europeans see me as a Tanzanian? What is this Tanzania? This is something we tried to create in my lifetime. I built Tanzania. So what is this Tanzania? The Europeans are right. The North Americans are right to look at me as an African. Not to look at me as a Tanzanian. Because Tanzanian is a creation of colonialism which is causing us a lot of trouble on the continent. So, to some extent, the Europeans are right when they refuse to see us in this differentiated manner. The Tanzanian, here is the president of Tanzania. He has been struggling there for 23 years before he stepped down to try and turn those tribes into 126 tribes in some kind of nation, and he has succeeded to some extent. This is what I want them to think of. Why? Why? They see me correctly as an African. So that's where I want to end. This is the other thing I really want to end. Africa south of the Sahara is isolated. Africa south of the Sahara is changing. That stereotype of trouble, there is trouble in Africa all the time, is nonsensical. There is trouble in Africa, there is trouble in Asia, there is trouble in Europe, there is trouble everywhere. And it would be amazing if after the suffering of the blessed continent for the last 100 years, that we didn't have what we're having. Some of these nations we have are not nations at all. They make no sense at all, either geographical sense or ethnic sense or economic sense. They don't. The Europeans just sat somewhere and say, you take that part, you take that part, and they drew these lines on a map, and here we are, trying to create nations which are almost impossible to create.